Dr. Neil Stanley, thank you so much for joining us on Mental Wealth.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So, we often hear through media and through talk generally that there is a fixed amount of sleep that one should be getting, 7 to 8 hours. What is your take on that? How many hours of sleep should we be having per night?
Well, it's interesting that actually, if you look through history, if you look at all the people who've written about sleep over the years, nobody's ever really said that it's 7 to 8 hours. People have said that it depends on your complexion, to use the old words, as to whether you are melancholic or whatever. And so it was actually given quite a wide range from about 6 to 9 hours. But essentially, the amount of sleep you as an individual need is like your shoe size or your height. It's individual to you. And some people only need 4 hours to feel great. Others need 11 hours to feel great. I know that I need 9.5 hours to feel at my best each day. So it's about getting the right amount of sleep for you. And very simply, the right amount of sleep for you is the amount that allows you to feel awake, alert, and focused during the day. If you feel awake, alert, and focused during the day, it doesn't matter how many hours of sleep you've had, that's enough for you. If you feel sleepy during the day, then of course you're probably not getting the sleep that you need. And we need to work out what amount of sleep we need, because then we need to be able to get it. So as I say, I know I need 9.5 hours sleep, which means I have to be in bed for at least 9.5 hours to be able to get that amount of sleep, and probably more like 10 hours. So it's good to work out how much sleep you as an individual need, rather than sort of try and get a magic number of hours, to get that sort of 8 hours. And if you don't get 8 hours, it's
Sure.
terrible. I have a sleep problem. If you feel fine, don't worry about it.
But would you say, Dr. Stanley, that perhaps some individuals have conditioned themselves to believe that the amount of hours they've trained themselves up to getting is more than adequate? And then obviously them not being able to identify the signs of sleep deficit. And where does sleep deficit fit into all this? Because obviously there is such a thing. So how is one supposed to know where one draws the line between adequate sleep and actually know I am suffering from sleep deficit? And how can we work on that to improve our sleep quality?
It's interesting the way you asked the question, because you used the phrase adequate sleep. That doesn't sound very good. You wouldn't live your life getting adequate nutrition or
Yeah.
adequate exercise. You would want to get optimal nutrition and optimal exercise. And I
Yeah.
think some people see sleep as getting in the way of doing other things. And there seems to be a movement towards people, you see these people now boasting about getting up at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning to be ultra successful. And this is just crazy. I mean, there's nobody
Yeah.
designed to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning for any length of time, and it doesn't do you any benefit. So people don't look at sleep in the way they would look at anything else. They look at how can we shortchange sleep? How can we survive on less sleep, because
Absolutely.
sleep isn't good, or it gets in the way of other things. And so essentially, as I say, if you feel absolutely awake, alert, and focused during the day, you've had enough sleep. Signs that you're not getting enough sleep: you're moody, you're miserable, you can't concentrate, you can't focus on the tasks that you're doing. So that's the way that it's expressed in our sort of daily life. And I think that people have looked at trying, as I say, trying to get by on less sleep than they actually need, and accept not feeling great during the day as just the price that they pay for not getting the sleep. So I always say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good do you feel during the day? 1, if I had to stop talking, you'd instantly fall asleep, and 10, you're the most awake you've ever been. I never come across tens, rarely nines. Most people are sixes and sevens. That's pretty disappointing. You've been to the gym, you've eaten your healthy breakfast, you've swallowed the multivitamin pill, and yet you're still a six or a seven. That is a very disappointing way of going through your life.
Absolutely. Well, the reason why I say adequate is, as you mentioned rightly, a lot of people try to cut corners. So, like, what is the minimum amount of sleep that will get me by or get me through that, hectic day? And namely, those individuals who are in high stress jobs, who feel like, they have to cut corners with sleep in order to optimize their work productivity. But of course, the two come hand in hand. You can't be productive at work if you're not getting good quality sleep. So, and of course, diet plays a huge part in that as well. Have you done any research related to nutrition and the quality of sleep? And obviously, those who are sleeping less are probably not eating very well as well.
Absolutely. The worse you sleep, the more you crave sugary and fatty foods. Indeed, the more you eat sugary and fatty foods. So if you cut down your sleep by half, so if you go from being 8 hours down to 4 hours, the next day you'll eat up to 900 calories more simply because you're sleepy. That's three sugary donuts. And so if you want to maintain a healthy weight or indeed lose weight, the most important thing you can actually do is get a good night's sleep, because then you'll stop having the cravings for those sugary and fatty foods. But yes, people are trying to, they believe that being awake for sort of 16 hours is better than being awake for 12 hours and being really effective. And if you're awake for 16 hours, your performance is as impaired as if you're over the drink driving limit. So, and if you're awake for 24 hours, you're twice the drink driving limit. Now, you wouldn't trust a drunk employee to do a job properly. So why would you accept somebody who is sleep deprived? And we have this, if somebody turns up to work drunk, it's a
Yes,
sackable offence. You turn up to work sleep deprived and you expect to have a round of applause and be made employee of the month because you're so
absolutely.
tough, you're so strong. And this comes from the top. As I say, you have all of these CEOs boasting about how little sleep they need. And this is just crazy. The first thing you do as a boss is employ people to do your job for you. You
Absolutely.
employ good deputies. If you have to be awake for sort of 20 hours a day in order to run your company, there is something seriously wrong there. And it's a very macho thing to do, is to boast, I'm better than you, I'm
Yes.
stronger than you. That's why I get my, seven-figure salary and my private jet and my, whatever, because I'm better than you. And what's interesting is there's been research done that shows that people who work for bosses like that actually have very little faith in the boss. They don't see that boss as being strong. They see the boss as being, quite a weird person and unnecessary. And there's this culture. I mean, if your contract says you're paid for 8 hours a day, why do you work more than 8 hours a day? There's this sort of pressure on you to work more, that if you don't work more, you're not a team player. You're letting the side down. Everybody else is doing it, and it's a very strange way that we've constructed our lives, whereas our lives now seem to be completely dedicated to work. We have our laptops, we can send emails before we've even had breakfast, and then we're sending emails at 11 o'clock at night. Whereas, when I started working 42 years ago, you went to work at 9 o'clock, you left at 5 o'clock, and there's nothing you could do about it. And we had that work-life balance so much easier. And there are so many gurus or whatever telling you how to get your work-life balance. And it's easy. Just work the number of hours you are paid for, no more.
Yes.
And that would change society overnight. But as I say, this I don't need sleep. I can power through. I'm a leader. I'm a winner. All of this is just self-delusion. And as I say, these people who are getting up at 3 o'clock. I mean, I say you see these
Yeah.
people saying they're getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why? What are they doing?
Absolutely. I mean, I was speaking previously to Dr. Steve Jecks, who focuses on mental health and wellness in the workplace. And we were talking about this issue. We brushed on this issue related to having to put boundaries and parameters in place from the leaders as much as the employees, whereby, one should understand one's limitations and not to be afraid to assert yourself if you feel run down, if you feel tired. But do you feel there's enough education, if you like, being taught within the workplace about the need for better quality sleep? Or are you seeing as well a deficit? There are missing pieces there.
I think there is a conflict. We now have more information about the importance of sleep than we've ever had before. Most people have an understanding of the importance of sleep, but they're just not going to change their behavior. And that is both from the workplace and also your lifestyle. Again, when I was growing up, television in the UK went off at 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock at night. We didn't have the possibility to binge watch the latest thing
Yeah.
on the streaming services. So we were busier at work, but also we have more things to do in the evenings, and therefore we fill our day. And sleep becomes the thing that gets compressed. If we want to grab time from somewhere, we grab time from sleep. And so sleep becomes a thing that you have to do at the end of the day rather than seeing it as a pleasure, as a luxury. But also, as I say, there is this conflict with the way we run businesses, which is, you've got to be dedicated, you've got to work hard, you've got to put the hours in. And we saw this. I can't remember which I think it was one of the US banks said recently that their junior staff will no longer work long hours. They'll no longer work more than 80 hours a week, which is just crazy, that
It
they
is.
think that that's a sort of an advance. So let's say business is still running in this very, very macho way of saying that sleep isn't important. But yes, as you say, there is if you have poor sleep, you are much more likely to be depressed. You're much more likely to be anxious. You can't cope with stress. And so again, we're trying to fix problems without sort of confronting the idea of actually the way you fix this problem is just to get a better night's sleep. It's as simple as that. And so the business culture is sort of toxic towards sleep.
Yes. Yes. Going on from the toxicity to something more positive, can you explain to us in more detail what are healthy sleep habits that you think everyone should adhere to?
Well, I mean, getting a good night's sleep is relatively simple. I mean, as I say, there's loads of information, there's loads of books, and loads of media about how to get a good night's sleep, but actually, it is very, very simple. You only need three things to get a good night's sleep. One is a bedroom conducive to sleep, a relaxed body, and a quiet mind. So a bedroom conducive to sleep, dark,
Yeah.
quiet, cool, comfortable. Pretty simple on that. A relaxed body, you've got to have done something during the day to order to need the rest and recuperation for sleep. But the key one, and the one that we probably in this day and age struggle most with, is the quiet mind. You cannot
Yes.
fall asleep unless you have a quiet mind. So you need to put the cares and worries of the day to bed long before you actually get into bed. And you need to, as I say, do something for 30 minutes, 45 minutes before bed that is relaxing. Now, that can be very individual again. I personally, every
Yes.
night, read before I go to bed. Regardless of what time I get into bed, I will always read. Maybe a couple of pages, maybe an entire book, but I will always read. That might not work for some people. For some people, meditation or yoga or listening to music or anything that just isn't stimulating, something that's relaxing. So, don't open don't open the gas bill, don't watch the news, don't have an argument
Absolutely.
with your partner. These things, aren't going to help you get a good night's sleep. But if you have a relaxed body, a quiet mind, and a comfortable place to sleep, then for the vast majority of people, that is sufficient for you to be able to go to sleep. But I say that what we don't do is that wind down. We don't make that time to wind down. We switch the television off. We brush our teeth. We get into bed, and we expect sleep to magically happen. And we haven't done anything to help sleep happen. So we're looking at how we can just foster that. When you get into bed, you should be in such a place that sleep naturally happens. And if you get into bed and intrusive thoughts start to invade your brain, your brain starts racing in, then there are things that you can do. Subtract 7 from 1,000 repeatedly, go through the alphabet, naming an animal beginning with each letter of the alphabet. Something like that. It's called thought blocking, and it's just to put out those intrusive thoughts about the world, life, and everything like that, and just do a simple exercise to protect yourself from those thoughts. And that really is it. All the other information that we've got falls into one of those three categories. So, as I say, there's hundreds of or thousands of sleep tips, but they all fall into one of those three categories. Does it quieten your mind? Is it something conducive for the bedroom? And do you feel relaxed? So if you've got pain or tension or anxiety, these things are going to get in the way of those very, very simple prerequisites for sleep. And so it's, from the most of us, the reason we don't sleep is that we don't take sleep seriously enough. And if we did see sleep as important, if we saw it as a good thing, as a
Yes.
pleasure, as a joy, but also something that's good for our physical, mental, and emotional health, then we would invest the time. But when I say invest the time, I don't want it to sound scary. I'm saying do something nice. Yeah, I'm not saying you have to do anything other
Yes.
than just do something nice for 45 minutes, something calm that you find relaxing, whatever that may be. That's a pretty good thing to have to say to people. You don't have to, eat a special diet or wear special clothes to do this. It's simply about being nice to yourself. So why wouldn't you want to do that in order, to get the benefits of a good night's sleep?
Very important advice. I think the addictive nature of social media has many thinking that the nice thing to do before bedtime is scrolling through the social media feeds. Unfortunately, we know that exposure to blue light and, excessive use of social media and just using electronic devices impairs sleep quality. I'm surprised to see limited amounts of research on that, but can you talk us through how the electronic devices have impacted the collective in their sleep patterns?
So the issue with devices before bed is twofold. One is light and the other is content. Now, it's not just blue light that is problematical, it is any light, and it's the brightness of the light that is key. And what's happening is, because we're not watching something on a TV screen and far away, we were looking at something 7-inch screen that we hold very, very close to our face. We're getting all of the light is impacting our eyes rather than it being diffuse across the room. So it's the brightness of the light, even paperwhite Kindles, things like that will actually disturb your sleep. But more importantly, probably, is content. If you've just watched a horror film on your TV or your phone or your tablet or whatever, you aren't going to have the quiet mind that I mentioned earlier. And that's the issue. It's what are you doing? If you're going through social media and you are interacting with social media in a negative way, again, you are going to be aroused or alerted by what you are doing on social media. It is not a passive interaction with social media. So it's both the light and what you're doing, which is problematical. And that is what is stopping us from getting the good night's sleep. And as I say, it's a very modern phenomenon that we've had this ability to have our entertainment with us in the bedroom, and being able to access pretty much everything and anything. I mean, if you imagine if you had a child, you read them a lovely bedtime story. It's quieting. It's nice. It's lovely to read them the story. If you read them a horror novel before bed, you really wouldn't expect them to be able to have a good night's sleep. And we're doing the same as adults. We're doing the same to us. We're allowing ourselves to be interacting with this information in a way that we've never been able to do before, and that is just we're loading our brains full of information, none of which is important, and our brains are struggling to be able to process all of that information, and all of this processing is done during the night when we're asleep, and our brains and our sleep just cannot cope with the magnitude of the amount of information that we're being exposed to, and that is causing us problems, because we have this fear of missing out, FOMO, so we have to
Yes.
look on our social media because we don't want to miss out, but also we have the inability to cope with all this information, which is basically the sort of a textbook description of what stress is. Stress is the inability to cope with all the information you get. So because we're not processing it during the night, it's hanging over into the day, and therefore it's basically just causing us stress. So stress causes poor sleep, but poor sleep is the biggest cause of stress. So we have to break that circle.
Absolutely. So talk us through, obviously you have years and years of experience in the world of sleep, but talk us through the clinical investigation of sleep.
So there are two ways of measuring sleep. One is subjective, i.e. asking the person how well they slept, and the other is objective, i.e. measuring physiological signs and signals that make up sleep. So subjective, essentially what I said earlier about the question, how do you feel during the day? That's pretty much as close as you're going to get to gaining all the information you need about a person's sleep. If somebody says, I slept fine, they probably slept fine. If somebody slept badly, they're probably going to be able to tell you that. So in the general idea, that really is all you need to do. There are hundreds of questionnaires that look at different aspects of sleep. But again, asking the patient, did you sleep well? Yes or no? Simple question. On the objective side, sleep is of the brain and for the brain. So what we would want to be doing is we'd want to be measuring the brain waves. And essentially what we do in that instance is we stick electrodes onto the scalp, doesn't hurt, isn't invasive, and what we're doing is measuring the brain waves in order to be able to assign different stages to sleep, and in order to get a picture of how well that person actually slept. Now, Because sleep is of the brain and for the brain, that means that the new things, the new sleep trackers, can't measure sleep in any degree of accuracy because all they're doing is measuring movement. They're not actually measuring brain waves. So essentially, if you're lying still, it says you are asleep. If you are moving, it says you're awake. That is not a measurement of sleep. So they cannot measure light, deep, or
Okay.
REM sleep, although they claim they can. They can't measure these things with any degree of accuracy. The problem is, though, people are using their tracking devices, believing the information that they're getting, and then trying to get perfect sleep, what's known as orthosomnia, the desire for perfect sleep. But because they're not measuring sleep, they're not being able to improve their figures because they don't know what the figures mean. And so they don't know how to improve that. So this obsession with our measured self, or the observed self, as somebody called it, isn't helping, and indeed is perhaps causing a problem in people because they're worrying about their sleep, and they're worrying about their sleep is actually causing them not to get a good night's sleep. So unless you're having your brain waves measured, then you might as well just ask the question, how do you feel during the day? And that will give you a pretty accurate measure of your sleep.
Fantastic. And based on your observations, how long should it take a person to fall asleep?
Um, a healthy adult should fall asleep within 15 to 20 minutes of switching the light off. Taking more than 30 minutes to fall asleep regularly would be indicative of insomnia. So again, if you get into bed with the quiet mind, the relaxed body, you should fall asleep within 20 minutes or so.
Okay. And we were talking about the third stage of sleep and how that helps, the generation and proliferation of neurons. So presumably hippocampal neurogenesis. So if one is not going through ample amount of time within that third stage of sleep, does it somehow compromise on learning and memory?
The brain is an incredibly clever organ, and so if you give the brain the an amount of sleep, it will use it most effectively. So if you have a short amount of sleep, then it will optimize getting as much of this deep, what's known as N3 sleep, which is where all the good stuff happens. It will optimize getting the most of that it can. The key thing to that theory, though, is that you fix your wake up time. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So you get up at the same time each day, regardless of how much sleep you've had before, because then the brain and body knows how much time it's got. So it might think, well, I've only got 4 hours, so bang, it will maximize getting that deep sleep as much as it can in those 4 hours. If it knows it's got 8 hours, then it can relax a bit more. So the body and brain prioritize that deep sleep. And so this is what I was saying earlier about sleep tracking. You get a figure saying, oh, you've got 20% deep sleep, but you have no idea how to improve your deep sleep. And there is no way of
Yes.
consciously improving your deep sleep. All you need to do is give your brain the as much time as it can to get the sleep it needs, and then the brain will use that sleep as optimally as possible, and it will prioritize that deep sleep. So it will sacrifice other stages of sleep in order for you to get that deep sleep.
Interesting. And if one is sleep deprived, does a nap actually help compensate for that sleep deficit? Because, you hear a flurry of, whispers about power naps being good. Others disagree. I'm a big advocate for a power nap, but I just wanted to ask you whether or not it can create balance again if you are sleep deprived, or does a nap in the afternoon have no effect positively in the long term?
A power nap is a very positive thing. A 20-minute nap will boost your performance by about 20% for about 3 to 4 hours, which is much more than a couple of cups of coffee would do. A couple of cups of coffee would only sort of boost your performance for about 30 minutes or so. So a power nap is a good thing. Um, what you don't want to do is sleep too long. If you sleep too long in the afternoon, you'll wake up and you feel like, you'll feel much worse than you did before you went to have the nap. You feel like you've been hit by a bus. And so really you don't want to sleep too long. And of course, if you have, what's termed as the siesta, which is that 2 hour sleep in the afternoon, then of course
Yes.
that's going to use up some of your sleep need at night. So say you need 8 hours sleep, you have 2 hours in the afternoon, you're only going to have 6 hours sleep at night. And this is why in places like Spain, you can't get a decent meal until sort of 9 o'clock at night. And so that might be fine, if you're in a hot country, if you're in a warm country where, it's not a terrible thing to be able to sit out of an evening having a meal or a drink. That's not a problem. If you do it on a societal level. But in Great Britain, where it's dark and cold even in the summer,
Yes.
it just wouldn't work. I mean, having a siesta would be
Sure.
crazy, because the whole idea of the siesta is that it's too hot to be able to do anything, whereas that never happens in Britain, so that's not an issue. So, and the 2 hours again is taking you hopefully through your deep sleep, or much of your deep sleep. So when you wake up, you don't feel this thing called sleep inertia, which is this grogginess that you can feel if you wake up in deep sleep. So 20 minutes or 2 hours, nothing in between, would be the most beneficial. And I say 20 minutes isn't going to use up any of your sleep need at night. And so you
Yes.
pretty much do that without fear. Whereas I say, if you have a 2 hour nap, you're probably wanting to be able to do that every single day. So again, it becomes the habit that you have that 2 hours during the day, and then you have less sleep at night, but the overall total across the 24 hours is still preserved.
Talk to us, Dr. Stanley, about insomnia. Is insomnia on the rise?
Insomnia is probably on the rise because we have so many things to replace sleep with. We have, our gadgets, our technology, whatever. We have electricity. I mean, it goes back to sort of having electricity. We can, keep the lights on. We can, keep the heating on, into the night. Whereas in the past, you had to go to sleep because it was cold and dark. And so we have, increased risk of insomnia, people chasing that perfect sleep and not getting it, and therefore worrying about it, not having the wind down, not seeing sleep as as a pleasure, as a good thing. All of these things are impacting on our sleep, and I say worry and stress are things that perhaps in the past we didn't really encounter as much as we do in this day and age. And also, I think the awareness of sleep. Say there's more information now than we've ever had before about sleep, and so the awareness of what is good and what is bad, and what we should, what we're putting up with and whatever. But I say it's mainly we don't take sleep seriously enough, and therefore insomnia is on the rise. And the thing with insomnia is, most people think of insomnia as the inability to fall asleep. Well, that's only part of it. There's also
Yes.
waking up in the middle of the night and then not falling back to sleep, waking up too early. And then there's this concept of non-refreshing sleep. So you've slept through the night, but you wake up and you don't feel that you've got any benefit from that sleep. So
That's interesting. So there are different categories of insomnia,
yeah,
if you
and
like.
some people can
Yeah.
suffer from just one, other people can suffer from all of them, and so it's not just to say a lot of people think insomnia is that inability to fall asleep, but there are, let's say, these four different types of insomnia, and different types of people have a problem. So, if you have pain or anxiety, you're probably going to have a difficulty falling asleep. If you suffer from depression, you're going to probably be one of these people who are waking up early, because there's a strong link between depression and early morning awakening. And then if you have a sort of a medical illness, pain, or getting up and needing to visit the bathroom repeatedly enough, that's going to be waking up in the middle of the night. And then non-refreshing sleep is probably something that's going to be more common in the elderly, who don't have this deep restorative sleep, or don't have as much deep restorative sleep, so they wake up and they feel that that they haven't really had any benefit from the sleep that they've got. And so these are all the things that people can complain of. And so it's about finding out, what is the problem, what may be causing the problem. I mean, probably most people remember something happening that caused their insomnia. If it's not a medical problem, people will remember some sort of event, moving house, getting a new job, an illness or something like that. They'll remember something happened. And essentially that thing, whatever it was, has knocked their sleep, made it worse. And usually sleep will get better over time, 2 or 3 months, sleep will get better. But for some people, it just doesn't get better, and therefore they start experiencing chronic insomnia. But I say most people recognize what the cause is for them. And so part of the treatment of insomnia is recognizing what that is, and potentially dealing with whatever that cause may be.
What is your take on melatonin and, those supplements that say they can help a person sleep?
Well, in being in Britain, melatonin is a prescription-only medication, so it's not easily available. So it's not something that we generally use or discuss, because it is designed as a tablet only for over 55s. Melatonin is not a hypnotic. It doesn't put you to sleep, and it doesn't really keep you asleep. It has very limited effects. I think it improves sleep by about 7 minutes across the night, which is really not worth it.
Absolutely.
And supplements, well, there are many things that are claiming to do this, that, or the other. I mean, one of the current things is magnesium. That's getting a lot of coverage. There is very little data showing these have any benefit at all. If you want to get a better night's sleep, there are things that you can look into your lifestyle that will help. But every body, every association recognize that the number one frontline treatment for insomnia is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So CBTI, which is a talking therapy, and essentially it just helps you relearn how to get back to sleep. So this is shown to be as effective as sleeping tablets. It's shown to have a huge longevity. I mean, it will last at least 10 months, maybe 12 months, maybe even more. Nobody's really done the studies. So that's the thing that you should be looking for. As I say, the likelihood that a supplement is going to have any benefit, if you eat healthily, if you're eating healthily, you will get all the nutrition, all the vitamins, all the neurotransmitters, everything you need. You don't have to eat anything or take anything in order to help you get to sleep. You just have to, as I say, do those things like the quiet mind, relaxed body. That's these supplements or whatever isn't going to do that for you.
As you say, I think it's the holistic approach, and one has to break down all the components of their lifestyle in order to assess what is the thing that's causing the disruption, as opposed to the quick fix or the preconceived idea that the quick fix solution lies in a tablet. But in this time and age, there is this problem with overprescription of medication, and of course, such things as melatonin in other parts of the world, not in the UK. But I wanted to ask you as well, how much do we attribute sleep impairment to the genetics of a person? Or is it completely environmental?
Very interestingly, there is some work that's coming out of Holland, Oes van Sommen's group in Holland, looking at the genetics of insomnia. So he has identified 5 different personality types of so there are some people who need to take a tablet, not because the tablet works, but they need to take a tablet. And there are other people who are quite happy to, do a talking therapy. And so he's identified these 5 types of personality. And then very recently, he's started to show that that is sort of mirrored by genetics. So it's a lot more complex than we thought.
Yes.
And so, as I say, there is this complexity about it. So in the same way that there are some people who couldn't meditate, their mind is just not
Yes.
able to meditate. However wonderful meditation may be, they're just not going to be able to do it. So those are sort of people who, aren't perhaps going to respond to cognitive behavioral therapy. And we know, however good cognitive behavioral therapy is, around 30% of people just don't do it. They just don't complete. Because probably of their personalities, as I say, and that then being reflected in their genetics. So, but also we know that, if your parents were poor sleepers, you're probably going to be a poor sleeper, even on that very, very basic level. So it's genetic and environment. You have to, as I said right at the start, if you need 9.5 hours sleep and you're not in bed for at least 9.5 hours sleep, you're not going to get a good night's sleep. And that's got nothing to do with genetics or anything like it. It's got very, very
Of
simply to
course.
do with your not giving your body the opportunity to get the sleep you need. So it's a mixture of both. Of course, there's not a lot
Sure.
you can do about your genetics. One thing that is genetically predisposed as well, not only your the time you need sleep, but also when you need sleep. Larks and owls, morningness and eveningness. Some
Yes.
people are very strong morning people, so they have no problem waking up, 5 o'clock and then starting work. Other people are strong evening people, whereby they want to go to bed much later and they want to wake up, perhaps past 9 o'clock, and therefore they're going to find it very difficult to work 9 to 5. That's genetically determined, and so you need to respond or to reflect on what you are and sort of perform appropriately. So there's no point in somebody who is a strong morning person getting a job where they're having to work an evening shift, because they're not going to be optimal, and vice versa. So all of these are genetically determined. Of course, when it comes to sleep, we can do what we like, but we're just not going to be optimal if we do it. That's the key thing. I can stay awake all night tonight.
Yes.
Doesn't matter, except for the next day I will feel terrible. But as I say, so there is this. Some people, and we mentioned this earlier, some people have just grown accustomed to the way they feel. It's not optimal, but they're getting by. But there are things that we can do where we could very much improve how we feel and how we perform. And there's no good thing about poor sleep, but there are so many benefits of a good night's sleep in terms of relationships, in terms of business, in terms of health. It's all positive if you get a better night's sleep.
What about the idea of the time that you go to sleep? So, there's also this idea that if you sleep before midnight, the quality of sleep is better. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, this is a very, very old saying. I've traced it back to at least 1640. So
Wow,
it is a very old saying. It actually has got to do with monks in monasteries
interesting.
because they used to get up to pray at midnight. Um,
Okay,
so they had 9 o'clock prayers and they had midnight prayers. Now, remember I said about this deep sleep, this N3 sleep. This happens in the first third of the night, probably the first 3 hours of the night. So if you sleep between 9 and midnight, you get this deep restorative sleep. After midnight, you sleep, but you're going to be in your dreaming sleep. You're going to be in the lighter stage 2 sleep, which is important but isn't as restorative. So it really is saying, sleep before the first third of the night is better than the last 2/3 of the night. Midnight is a misnomer only caused by monks having to get up to pray. So, so that's that I think where it comes from. And the original version was that 1 hour before midnight is worth three after midnight, and then it somehow changed to two after midnight. But it's again, we talked about larks and owls in the last question. And so it's about when you go to sleep is down to you should go to sleep when you feel sleepy. Doesn't matter what time it is, if you feel sleepy, go to sleep. Whatever time. So, if you're sitting there on the couch and you're watching something and your eyes start closing and your neck starts, nodding, then go to sleep. That your brain and body is saying you are sleepy. That is the ideal time to go to sleep. So we shouldn't be going to sleep because the program we're watching finishes or because that's the time our partner goes to sleep. We should go to bed. We should go to sleep when we feel sleepy, whatever time that may be. So as I say that old saying about the 2 hours before, 1 hour before is as I say doesn't really stack up. It's old wives' tale.
you mentioned the habits of a partner. So this goes on to a good opening for the book that you've in fact worked on. But I wanted to ask you, how disruptive is it to sleep next to a partner? Because everyone has their own sleep habits, So is it invasive? Like, is it something that could potentially get in the way of one's good quality sleep? What is your take on that? And we want to know more about the book as well.
I did one of the first ever couple sleep studies back in 2005, and we found that much of your sleep disturbance is caused by your bed partner. They make noises and they move, and some people happily share their bed with another person, and I'm not suggesting that they should change, but for the vast majority of us, we find that our bed partner is annoying and is disturbing of our sleep. And we have got this idea that we should share our bed with another person. But that's a very modern idea, and it is very specific to sort of a Victorian and sort of an Anglo-Saxon world.
Yes.
Where in the late Tudor era we started building houses with chimneys so we could started building bedrooms, but we weren't rich enough to build many bedrooms, so we had one bedroom, so we were forced because we were poor into sleeping
Yeah.
with another person, with our partner. The rich have never slept together because they have space, they have the ability to, they have many bedrooms, or they have the ability to sleep separately. And so we've pushed ourselves into this crazy idea of sharing the bed with another person, and then it became you have to do that for the quality of your relationship. If you sleep separately, somehow your relationship is suffering or your marriage is suffering, and nothing could be further from the truth. So I published a book earlier this year called Sleep Divorce, and it's the first sort of self-help manual to tell people how to navigate the conversation with their partner and how to navigate sleeping separately. Because say there is so much pressure from the media and people like that saying, oh, I say for the sake of your relationship, you have to sleep together. But I say it is not true. And I say it's a very modern construct that doesn't help anybody. So the World Health Organization says that the sound in your bedroom should be 35 decibels with intermittent peaks of 45 decibels. Nobody understands what that means. 35 decibels is a quiet conversation in a library. 45 decibels is a sort of a lorry going past your window. But if you have a snorer in your bed, they're between 65 and 95 decibels. So vastly louder than the World Health Organization is saying that's disturbing. We sleep in double beds that are so small that we have less space to sleep in than our child has. And we wonder why we have a bad night's sleep. So, as I say, it's about doing what's right for you, but recognizing that sleeping separately is an option. It is a pragmatic, solution to a problem. If you wake up each morning wanting to strangle your partner because they've disturbed your sleep, then you really should think about relocating.
And as a final question, Dr. Stanley, what would you say to those who are suffering from some type of sleep impairment? What do you advise that they do? What are the first steps?
First step is to take it seriously, is not just to put up with it. And then seek the correct help. Go to see your doctor and find out what is causing the problem. I mean, insomnia is the issue for most people, and there are simple things that you as an individual can do. We talked about many of them throughout this chat. So your bedroom needs to be dark, it needs to be quiet, it needs to be cool. Consider separate beds if your partner's disturbing you. So there's a lot of things you can individually do. Think back to what perhaps caused your sleep problem and see if you can address that, if it's anxiety or depression or whatever. But also look at the other sleep problems that you may have, sleep apnea, a breathing problem, snoring, or restless leg syndrome, all these sorts of things. Look to see if they're the cause. And also then look at other causes, so pain, depression, anxiety. For many people, their medications may be disturbing their sleep. So look at whether that's a cause or an issue of your poor sleep, and if there are alternatives that may help you sleep better. So as I say, it's taking it seriously and getting your doctor to take it seriously and to investigate it to find out what the issue is, what can be done about it, and not just accept poor sleep. Certainly as you get older, oh, I'm old, my sleep is poor, what can I expect?
Yes.
My knee hurts, my back hurts, my sleep's not good, I'm 60 years old, that's just life. No, it's not.
No.
It's not just life. There are things you can do, and as I say, getting the benefit of a good night's sleep is literally can be life-changing. It can give you back the day just by sleeping better at night.
Very valuable advice. Dr. Neil Stanley, thank you so much. Honestly, it's such a fascinating topic. We could be here for hours talking. We appreciate your time, and we hope to catch up with you in the very near future to hear about your latest books and developments. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.